Hello everybody, this is Maniac4Games, and I have an update to my gaming room setup, but first I want to start things off with a haul to explain how this update will work. I went to two video game places recently in Somerville, New Jersey. The first one being Yestercades, which is a very cool arcade setup. It is the play by hour sort of type, so you don't have to keep chugging quarters into a machine. You just get a wristband, and when you're done, it'll track how long you've been there. That gets calculated to about like $8 an hour, which is actually pretty good, and then tax added later. The other place I went to, which is nearby there, is Retro Classics, another video game store. I might actually visit both of these in the near future, yet again. But there's a very small haul here. I haven't seen these in too many other places so far, at least for the game. I haven't seen Nicktoons Racing for the PlayStation elsewhere, and it's only $13 in good condition, so I'm happy with it. I grew up with this game on the PC. I may have once or twice played the arcade version, which I think is still available in some Chuck E. Cheese's and other places, and I have tested this disc. It works well, and I'm happy to play that again. And the second thing I picked up is the old school AV to HDMI converter. Now, this is specific because they have two kinds of these, and the other one is HDMI to AV converter. That means you would be able to play, let's say, an NES or N64 or GameCube or something along those lines, which takes an AV input, connect that to an HDMI TV, which is what I'm trying to do today. The other one would be taking something like the Nintendo Switch or the Wii U or a PlayStation 4 and putting it onto an analog CRTV or cathode ray tube television. An older TV. So what I'm trying to go with is this option, and this is going to work very well. I'm going to show you a quick diagram before we get into the update itself to give you a better idea what I'm trying to go for. So here is how I'm planning the new setup. I have the GCN, which is GameCube, N64, Nintendo 64, and NES are currently hooked up to an AV channel splitter. So you just have to switch between them if you wanted to play any of those and display it on the TV. Currently, they are set up as a direct line to the TV itself. There is an AV or composite input in there so that if I just switch the settings on my TV, it'll go straight to these, or whatever the input is. What I wanted to do, and I could easily do that through the VCR as well, but for right now, I don't have it attached for anything. I'm just going to use it as a VCR DVD player. I have the Wii U and the Xbox 360 each have HDMI cables that connect to the TV as well. So HDMI 1 is Xbox 360, HDMI 2 is the Wii U. My plan is what the diagram shows here. I don't have the HDMI splitter yet, but I at least want to test out the AV to HDMI conversion and see if that can still go through here. If that works, then the splitter is pretty obvious afterwards. This would basically work the same way the AV splitter works. It would just be a simple switch between them, so I could go to, this TV would only have the input being HDMI 1, and then it would go here. And then I would say, okay, go to channel 1, 2, 3, or 4, and it could go to one of these options. 4 we'll get back to in just a moment. If I have it set up to one of these, it'll go around to here, and then I'll have to switch on this one if I want to play the GameCube, N64, or the NES. So that's the plan. Anything in green in here is an AV connection. The red, yellow wire hookup. And anything in blue in here is the HDMI setup. So that's the thing we want to convert to attach it better to the TV. Now, hopefully, if this works, then I should be able to not only play them with a little simpler setup for all the switching around, but also it'll be a way for me to stream and record gameplay of these older systems. Right now, my Elgato HD60, which I've had since about 2015, almost exactly 3 years to the date, only can attach to these two because of the HDMI ports on the the Elgato. But if I do the converter here, then I can have this go in here, and I can set up the Elgato somewhere in here to connect to the TV. So any system that would go through here can be recorded, and I can see it on the TV as well. And I also noticed that with the HDMI splitter that I have, the one I just showed in the haul video, it has a little switch on it to switch between 720p and 1080p, so I will test that out in this video as well. We've now hooked up the AV and HDMI converter, and I learned that there is an extra cable in there to connect it via USB to an outlet. So this is something that I just needed to have a box separate to attach it into an outlet, which you can see along the side. I have the Elgato doing much of the same thing right now. Even though the USB wire could connect to a computer and transmit whatever recording I want to do onto there, it does still need it as a power source. So, if I don't need to record gameplay, I don't have to move the Elgato that much. I could still have that plugged in, same as the AV and HDMI converter, along the side. It'll still transmit everything just right through the HDMI ports. So that's why this converter is connected to the Elgato, and the Elgato on the other side of it has an HDMI cable to the TV. Now, from the HDMI to AV, the AV to HDMI converter, this AV is currently connected to the splitter, which should be right up here above the Pelican bongos. That's my only issue, is the fact that the switches are kind of apart from each other, and it might be able to move some wires around so that it's a little more centralized, like fit it, towards the middle of the TV itself. And that also goes for when I get the HDMI splitter, if I can fit it right along the front. I do have some extra space. I can move the TV itself back a little bit on top of the VCR, so I can make that happen. But everything else after that is pretty much the same setup. The splitter is going to the 3 consoles, you can see there. I know it's a little clustered, but it still works. I'm only going to need one at a time, so if I need to go to the NES, I'll just move the N64 a little bit back, and I can fit the games in there. And I can access the GameCube. The only thing that has been moved, and I didn't put it back in here, was the Nintendo Wii U. I was trying to test that separately, and I didn't put it back in this space yet. Normally it sits in this cubby on the side. It may go back there. It may go on the shelf underneath it. I have to wait and see. The potential that I have is to get the Switch. I've talked about this recently on another video, and I think this could still work. The Switch would need an HDMI hookup, so I could attach that right into the HDMI splitter. Usually the splitters would be like 4 ports, if I remember correctly. If there is a 3 port, I'll take it. But and that's actually good, because if there is a 3 port splitter, the other HDMI hookup for the TV would be open. So I could plug the Switch right into the TV without having to do splitters or whatever. So that's good. But that is yet to be seen or written. I will still fit the Wii U back here sometime soon, but at least for now, I'm going to test out gameplay across the AV units, that is the GameCube, NES, and N64, and I'll show you the difference between the 720p and the 1080p. Long story short, when it came to recording gameplay, 1080p was choppy. It was not receiving all of it at once. It would cut out the music or visuals very frequently. And 720p was actually the better resolution for every one of these. Now, the NES also had a couple issues. I'm not entirely sure what they are, or if it's something that might have just been during the gameplay and not actually affecting the system. But I noticed with some titles, they were either not showing up on there. There's also, the NES. It's not as good as the top loader version of it. But I noticed with some of them, they would have a long black screen like this, followed by a green line roughly around the center of here. I don't know if that's a specific error. I don't know if that's something I just need to clean each of the cartridges again because I've already cleaned them before, or if I need to do something with the NES itself. I do have extra pins just in case I need to replace those, but that is something that I'm still looking into, and some of it showed up during the gameplay, especially for the NES, but all the other systems seem to work pretty well through 720p. So here, at the end of the video, I will just have some of that gameplay to show the differences between the two.
Woo!